Thank you. My condolences, Graham. If you need anything, I really appreciate that. Yeah, some of you know this. My father passed away Thursday, and Wednesday night, Thursday morning, depending on what time zone you're in. And that's why I haven't been live. And I didn't even know if I wanted to go live today, but I kind of miss doing this actually. So I haven't done a show, I think, since Monday, because I got the news Tuesday that my father's 84 and his health has not been good the last couple of years. He's been sort of in and out of hospitals, and he's been in hospice for a while. And I've gotten he doesn't have much time. I mean, I've heard that he could go any day now, kind of for like over a year probably. But Tuesday, it was really, I spoke with my brother because my dad was in Chicago, and it was very much like they are now saying he's got 24 to 48 hours. So yeah, some of you have lost your parents, you've lost your dad, and I appreciate that. So, he was in a lot of pain, and he was saying to me and to all of us, oh God, I'm ready to go. He's been saying that for a couple of years now. My stepmother, his wife passed away about 7 years ago. So I think he obviously very much missed her. She passed away very suddenly. She was a lot younger than my dad. When I heard the news he passed away, it's obviously sad, but I'm also very much glad that he's out of pain. It just sucked. And, he's in Illinois, which doesn't have euthanasia laws. And I just, it's funny talking about this with my brother. It's like, why shouldn't he should be allowed that? Like, I really get seeing this up close and seeing my dad deteriorate, and how uncomfortable he was. And my brother like saw it in person. I saw it like over the phone and, FaceTime and stuff. My brother had to watch it in real time. And, my brother said had he been living in Oregon, which is a state that has euthanasia. I'm not sure how many states have it. I don't think it's a lot. He would have been able to choose to leave a while ago. He could have left several months ago or whatever. And, I just remember all the Jack Cavor, everyone's, the religious right, just, how dare, like, who the fuck is the religious right to deny somebody to choose their own death with dignity? And it really resonates with me a lot because as many of you know, I've studied Japanese martial arts, including the Iaijitsu, which is a samurai sword. And I've studied a fair amount of the samurai culture. And, harikari, which is the act of doing it, and seppuku is sort of the other name that's called to, it's like ritual suicide on how to, seppuku is like how you regain your honor and, die with dignity. And it's just such a it's another stupid thing that like Europe and Christianity has forced on us. Like, live till the end, like get to this, this American competitive, like get to this number. I got to live to be as long. No, I don't. I saw what my dad went through the last couple of years, and I don't want any part of that. I don't want any part of it. I like, if you told me, Graham, you're going to be able to surf and do yoga and do comedy and be mentally cognizant and physically able to be physically active and do all these things until you're 70 years old. And you told me that. You said you'd 70. When you hit 70 or 75, let's call it 75. When it's 75, you can do and you can do everything you're doing now, yoga, surfing, physically active, be funny, have the brain capacity to be a comedian and do this show until you're 75. And one day you'll just die. Or you can live to be like 84, 85, but the last 4 years of your life are going to be shitty, in and out of hospitals, breaking this, physical therapy, and then eventually this awful slow decline that's just painful for you and everyone around you. I'd be like, punch out at 75. Like, that's good. I'm 51. All right. You're telling me I got 24 years to live? Great. Brad, I'm in. And I think I want to talk about this a lot because Americans have this weird concept with death, and having studied more Eastern philosophy, and I highly recommend to study that if you haven't. And if you get something out of Christianity, that's fine. Great. There's a lot of wonderful sentiments in the Bible, but really, if you're going to be a Christian, really understand who Jesus was. I don't think Jesus would have been like, live till the bitter end and be uncomfortable and die without dignity. And, you know, this is a little graphic and a little gnarly, but it and I don't say this as any sort of disrespect to what my dad had to go through or anyone's parents had to go through. My dad basically had blood in his stool this last, and he just bled to death that way. Like, how awful is that? That's awful. It wasn't fun or, I mean, like, and then my brother was telling me he like wanted some pain medication, but like legally the hospice team could only give him so much or what. And you're just like, and he wanted water and he could only drink like this coagulated water and stuff like that. It's just like, what the fuck? So Americans, and I've noticed this from studying Eastern philosophy and traveling around the world and meeting people in different cultures, Americans really have a weird thing with death. And I think it's because we've been sold, part of the American exceptionalism is like, we can do everything and we get everything we want. And so we still have never we don't face death well in this country. You know, even just like, you know, I've heard people at funerals like, I was good. I was brave. You know, I didn't cry. What? A friend of mine's mom died last year, and I've known him for a long time, and I knew his mom. She was really cool. I stayed at their house, you know, when we were in college and stuff. And he was like crying on the phone, and he was apologizing. Like, I'm sorry. I'm out of, I got to pull myself together. I'm like, no, you like grieve, cry. It's a normal process. It's okay to like, your body needs to release it from a physiological level. Like they've even done studies, emotional tears have a different chemical composition than like the tears of like you're sneezing or you get something in your eye. It's a different chemical composition, which says that emotions are in us, and stress and pain and suffering and loss, and they're in us on a cellular level. And you need to release it. You need to release it. Like one of the problems why we have toxic masculinity in this country is we tell men, young boys especially, don't cry, suck it up, don't cry. And it's like, no, I mean, there's a difference between a child that's like throwing a temper tantrum because they don't get their way, and some people act that way as adults, versus you should cry. Like when my friend said, you know, I'll be better in about 2 weeks. I said, you don't need to, dude, you can cry for a year. Some cultures mourn for a year. I mean, you know, I've many good friends of mine that are Jewish who are like, yeah, you sit Shiva for a week. You take a whole week and you just do nothing for a week, and people come by the house, and that's a great culture. When my samurai instructor, Master Shimabukuro, who was Hanshi, which means exemplary warrior, and he has this book, Flashing Steel. I highly recommend you read it. If the first half of the book is all Buddhist and samurai philosophy. The second half is like technique. So if you don't, you know, whatever. But even if you don't want to read the technique, read the samurai philosophy. It'll give you a better insight into who I am and what this show is about. And I remember it was a Buddhist funeral, and they did the chanting. There was this Buddhist priest or monk or whatever they call it, and he was like doing this chant, and then people would go up and line up and pray, and you know, you could put incense in, and it lasted for an hour. And you know, people gave some wonderful speeches, and they said, you know, mourn the loss for a year. And that doesn't mean, to me, my interpretation of that is not like, oh, I walk around and wear black, and but just like Paul X BSOG height. And it was just like, think about them. And like, I learned so much from my samurai instructor. So I would just implement his stuff into my life. And when my stepmom passed away, she was a nurse. She was a wonderful person. She gave me this wonderful poem. If I can if I can keep one heart from breaking, I shall not live in vain. If I can ease one life from making, I shall live. If I can take a fainting robin into its nest again, I shall not live in vain. I think it was Emily Dickinson poem. And she taught me wonderful stuff, and so I just carry the stuff that she brought to me. And so, my dad and I had a rocky relationship because he he admitted this to me. He was an alcoholic. And so that was tough to deal with sometimes. But I made amends to him, and I made my peace with the man several years ago. And so there was no like anger or unresolved anything when he passed. It was just like I get to look at like, Americans really have a problem with death, man. They really have a problem. And I don't get it, because it's like, we're all going to die. It's all going to happen. There's 7.5 billion people on the planet. Every single person is going to have a last day on this earth. Now, the way things are going, it might all happen at once, but so it's important to grieve. It's important to cry, and grief kind of doesn't, it's not, grief is, it's not a straight line. It's tangential, and you'll have days and moments, and it's okay, and let it out. And that there's so much in America, like, oh, don't cry. Or people say, oh, I lost it the other day. And you're like, well, what happened? Oh, I was just crying. Well, that's okay. That's a good thing. It's a good thing to cry. It's a good thing, to let it out. And we don't want to do that in this country. And then we're so scared of death. I think that's what a lot of this, like, some of the reactions to death, because it's this thing we can't control. It's like some of these like survivalist Second Amendment people, gotta have a gun, and you get rid of this, and society's going to collapse, and whatever. We're still, everyone's going to die, right? And regardless of what happens in November, a million years from now, this planet could just be done. A meteor could hit it, the sun could burn out, and it's over. 1,000 years from now, 100 years from now, 20 years from now. So everything, all life on planet Earth is going to end. And that means anything anybody did, any song written, the hieroglyphics, anything in a museum, Abraham Lincoln's speeches, anybody, Gandhi, anything they did, anything that's part of our collective, it's all going to get wiped out, and it's going to be gone. It's going to get turned into dust. And that's the universe. That's like when I started studying like Tibetan philosophy. The Tibetans do this, I don't know if you've ever seen it, Tibetan sand art. And I would look it up online, and it's this very intricate, these like little painted pieces of sand. And it takes weeks and sometimes months to make. And it's this beautiful, intricate thing that's put together, all these stones of different colors and all this stuff, right? And it's amazing. And then you know what they do? They put it out in the wind and let the wind blow it away. Everybody gets to enjoy it, but the whole, it's like, why? And an American would be like, why would you spend all that time making that art and then just let it get blown away? Because we have this, as is said here by Pacho El Carnivoro. Sorry, dude, if I butchered your name. Sorry, dude, I gringoed up your name. My bad, bro. Shave your knuckles for justice. High gram death is very natural. Yes, it is. It's going to happen to all of us. I think Americans are too tied up in material things. I think you're 100% right. I think that's such a big part of it, is we're all tied up. We can buy and do anything we want in America, get anything we want, whenever we want. It's all us. It's all me, me, me. And it's like, I think it's, so people, we're too tied up in material things, and death is this non-material thing. And again, going back to the Tibetan sand art, the whole purpose of that exercise is to spend all this time and effort making this art, and then it gets blown away. That's life. I work hard doing this show. You all work hard doing whatever you're doing in your lives. We all, like, I spent time going to school and learning this. I've been a comedian for 20 some years, and the show takes a lot of time, and I love doing it. And I spent all this time. I did yoga today, I work out and all this stuff. And eventually it's going to be gone. And that's okay. That's the beauty of it, which should then teach you. And Americans' reaction to that is like, yeah, I got to buy it. I'm going to get a gun. Like, I think some of these gun nuts, I'm like, do you think your guns, and your canned food or whatever, you think that's going to make you immortal? Like, that's some of these MAGA people, like that that's why they're like, there's no COVID, because they can't shoot COVID with a gun. Whereas what it should make you do, and what a lot of these Eastern philosophies and religions and classic spiritual texts talk about, that's why you live in the moment. Every single person in your life that you care about, there is going to be a last day that you see them and talk to them, whether you know it or not. Maybe it'll be like what I did. I got to FaceTime with my dad on Tuesday. My brother brought up the camera. I got to say bye. My dad still recognized, hey, Graham. He's barely alive, quite honestly. The last time I saw him in person was October of 2017. I was working in Chicago, and he was in the hospital at that time. And I went to go say hi to him in person. And I walked out of that hospital. I thought, this might be the last time. I've had several times where I've seen my dad and thought, this might be the last time. And then I see him again. Okay. So it's why I live in the moment. And I don't believe in the YOLO of like selfish, like, oh, I'm just going to sleep around and steal and spend money and be a dick, not that YOLO, not the selfish American consumerism YOLO, but hey, tell your friends you love them. The last 3 years, especially of doing this show, and also when I went through all the stuff, if you watch my Me Too story that I went through, and memories of childhood trauma and having to get a restraining order against an ex-girlfriend, really, really difficult, painful stuff. Way more of me and my guy friends say I love you than we ever used to. And I was a guy who played sports, and, maybe a guy friend would say, I love you, brother. And I'd say, okay. And maybe we joke about it or whatever. But now it's just like, hey man, I love you, brother. Like it's a good thing to share and experience. And, I was surfing at the beach yesterday. It was just beautiful. And I went to go charge my car. And then I was like looking at the clock. Well, maybe I should get back for this. And I was like, no, we're going back to the beach to watch the sunset. And I saw a beautiful sunset. And if I die in my sleep tonight, I'm going to go surfing after this. Today was a great day. I was kind to everybody I met. We're going to talk about some political stuff. My friends and family know, the ones that I'm close to know that I love them, know I care about them. The people that we had falling outs with, well, sorry. Maybe look in the mirror and discuss your behavior, why your behavior created that situation. But I mean, I had a great phone call with my ex-wife. She called me, and she was from Brazil, and we're still friends. And she said this wonderful thing, English obviously is not her second language, or it is not her first language. Portuguese is her first language. And so she speaks very good English now. But when she first moved to this country back in 2008, her English was not very good at all. And she's like, some friends of hers recently sort of made fun of her for her accent or her English. She's not speaking perfectly all the time grammatically or whatever. And some friends made fun of her, gave her a hard time about it. And she took us, Ram, when that happened, I thought about your post when I saw that your father passed away, and he was always kind and listened and tried to speak Portuguese with me and treated me with dignity and respect. And I said, yeah, that's my dad. Unless you pissed him off. If you pissed him off, maybe he'd be different. But he was always, especially because he understood being a foreigner. And my father had a PhD, and he spoke 3 languages, and one of them was German. We lived in Germany. Well, my family lived in Germany in the 60s before I was born. They lived in Berlin back when the wall was up. And then when I was a kid in the 70s, we lived in Munich. And, you know, Germany in the 60s and 70s, there was a lot of resentment. There was a lot of like, oh, yay, Americans. But there was also a lot of resentments because America, you know, won the war. And some Germans were not like, oh, God, Hitler was a monster. They were just mad that he lost. So, you don't build up this crazy, awful, evil Nazi army and then people just go, oh, sorry. You know, like there's some people who are like, we should have won that war or whatever. So there was definitely some resentment towards us. And I got into fights every day when I was in the first grade. Every single day I had to fight German kids. Every single day. And my dad had to, I mean, he had a loud voice and a temper. And if anyone messed with his kids, it's the thing I did like about him. He'd yell at us, and there was some not great stuff that happened growing up, but man, would he defend us. And so he understood, and I explained this to my ex-wife, he understood what it was like to be a foreigner in another country. I did too. I took a lot of shit as a 5-6-year-old kid. I had to fight German kids every day. I still have a little like towards Germans a little sometimes. I've met plenty of wonderful Germans. I know there's Germans that watch the show, and that's so cool. But if I come across, when I was in Germany and some like gate agent with the airline gave me a little German attitude, I would just like, anyway, my point is to say that my dad understood what it was like to be a foreigner in another country, and he loved traveling and learning about other cultures. And he imparted that with me. And I shared that to my ex-wife. I was like, that's why he was really cool and respectful of you, because we knew what it was like. We took a lot of shit as this American family in the mid-70s living in Munich, Germany. And yeah, so it was really beautiful. When she told me that, I started crying. I said, what a beautiful, thank you for telling me that. What a wonderful thing that my father imparted, you know? And a big part of this show, so my dad was a research professor, and he was never one of these people that was like, these kids today. He never said that. The most he would say is, oh, there's a generation gap. I just don't get that younger people are doing. He never was like, these millennials, you know. He would very much go, hey, to his students, put the phones down and really learn how to interact. You want to be, because he was a theater professor. He's like, you want to learn how to act, you better learn how to do this. You can't act doing that. But he was a professor at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and he taught the grad students there. And then he was a dean at Emerson University in Boston. And then he retired. He kept retiring, and we were always like, he's not going to stay retired. He just loved working. He loved what he did. And he had this thirst for knowledge, loved reading, loved learning things. And I got some of that from him for sure. My mom is way more like artsy creative. Not that my father isn't creative, but he's like an academic and she's more like an artist. So I got both of those traits from them, that combination of things. So, we went to museums a lot when I was a kid living in Germany. And as a kid, I was like, oh, this sucks. I hate this. But I loved it. I loved it. Now I love that I was raised with that different culture, and I love going to museums and learning about different people and all that stuff. And so, so his thirst for knowledge and research and get the facts, it's a big part of what this show is, right? I say, follow the money. I say, do the research, try to get it right. That's what I've said on this show from day one. Like, you might not agree with me and I might get it wrong, but it's my opinion based on what research I've come up with. And if I get it wrong, I'll admit it. And if I say something that you don't agree with, just know I'm coming to this opinion honestly. I didn't come to this opinion because the network told me I got to say this, or, hey, man, Boeing buys a lot of ad time, Graham. You can't go after the war machine. And that's from him, man. That was his ethics. That's who he was. And he wasn't a big dude. He wasn't a fighter. He's this 5'8", 5'9" college professor. And me and my brother were more like stockier sport athlete. We both played football kind of stuff. But he didn't take shit, man. I remember one time he came to visit me in LA, and we were taking the bus. We went to the Getty Museum because it's a fantastic museum. If you ever get to LA, when they open everything back up, go to the Getty. And I took him there. And we were riding the bus back. I was living in the valley at the time before I lived by the beach. And, you know, a lot of Latinos in LA, especially in the valley. I was living in Van Nuys. And this woman behind us, Latina woman, and this like white trash guy sits next to her. And he starts, and this is in the early 2000s. And he starts like, speak English, man. This is America. And he starts saying this to this woman. And I'm sitting there like, okay, how do I deal with this guy? I'm like, in my head, I'm like, I turn around and say something. If he gets violent, what do I do? And I'm trying to plan this all out. And while I'm going through this thought process, my dad, who was in his 60s at the time, again, not a big imposing man at all, not a fighter, has no martial arts training, nothing, just turns around and goes, knock it off. And the guy goes, what? And I go, man, you keep, and then I jumped in. I was like, you keep hassling that lady, leave her alone. And my dad goes, I'm tired of your racist nonsense. Knock it off. And then he turned his back on the guy, which I was like, well, that's a mistake, Dad. That's a guy that you haven't studied any fighting. You don't turn your back on someone that you're arguing with. So then I just turn around and I'm just looking at this guy the whole time to make sure he doesn't do anything. And then I go, maybe you ought to get off the bus. And he got off the next bus. But that's my dad. Wasn't going to take shit from anybody. Just wasn't going to take it. Didn't care if this guy got violent. Didn't give a shit. He was just like, no, he's not my dad. He came up to like, here's this little college professor guy. He's not physically imposing at all. But he just said, knock it off. And he has a very loud voice. So where I get my loud voice. So that's my father. I sort of rambled on a little bit. But Americans, it's okay to accept death. It's okay. It's a natural thing. It's going to happen. You should cry when somebody passes away. And if you were angry at them, it's okay to let that anger out in some healthy manner, not take it out on other people and start fights and yell at people. That's bullshit. Find a healthy release for the anger. Anger's like fire. When we use fire in a controlled environment, we can cook with it. We can make things, metal, glass. You know, we can drive our cars, we can heat, we can do all these wonderful things. When fire is out of control, like we've been seeing in the West Coast, it destroys. And that's the thing with anger. When anger's focused, like I'm pissed off, like I'm sure Rosa Parks was angry and she was like, nope. And she sat down and did this amazing act, right? That inspired a lot of people. And that was probably, or she was probably there's some pissed, there had to have been anger in her. There was anger in Dr. King. He was like, no. And it motivates you. Many of you who are activists are getting in the streets and becoming activists because you're mad. You're a little pissed off. Now you can get mad and take it out on your friends and family. You can get mad and get into a fight with somebody. You can get a gun. You can do all this crazy shit. Or you can say, no, I'm going to focus this anger on fixing this. It's going to be a motivator. And that's a thing I got from him. So it's okay to talk about death. It's okay to plan for it. It's okay to be sad when somebody dies and also celebrate their life when people are like, oh my God, like some people are like, and I appreciate the people like, oh, I'm so sorry. Thank you. But some people are like, oh, it's such a tragedy. It's not a tragedy that an 85-year-old man died. I mean, that's a pretty good run. When a kid dies, Yemen's a tragedy. Yemen is Breonna Taylor. That's a tragedy. That didn't need to happen. Someone in their 80s, you know, it's not it's just, that's life. So thanks for supporting the show, everybody.